Okay, welcome back to another episode of Gym Eat Repeat, the podcast. We're coming to you from the Mr. America and Gym Eat Repeat studios on the skyline of New York City. Today we're going to have a guest on that is, maybe some people know you, maybe some people don't, but I'm going to go ahead and give you a little introduction and let people understand how you ended up where you are today being on a podcast. So this is Desmond Butler. Desmond is an investigative journalist for the Washington Post. He's done stories in London, Berlin, Istanbul, New York, DC. He's covered everything from climate to terrorism. So I know people are out there probably saying, well, why is he on Gym Eat Repeat? Well, Desmond is also the investigative journalist that did a huge expose on the NPC, IFBB, and some of the things that were going on inside of our sport. So we want to talk to him today about, what went into that, how much time was involved. There was numerous articles, I think maybe 6 or 8. And, there's people that have questions. There's people that want to know, how all this happened. So Desmond, with that being said, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
It's honestly a blessing and a privilege to be able to get you on here. So, these articles that were in the Washington Post, some people read them, some didn't. I don't know, how many athletes maybe are reading the paper or seeing them online, but you've uncovered things from, sexual exploitation of women in the sport, drug use, financial improprieties, fear and intimidation by the heads of the organizations. And, reading these articles, you look at it and it's like, I know someone mentioned, it looks like a mafia type movie, being on display in the sport of bodybuilding.
Yeah, we took a deep dive into the state of the NPC and the IFBB Pro. We had a number of articles and with different strands. We looked at sexual exploitation in the sport. We looked at steroid abuse and the horrible deaths I think everybody who's been following the sport knows is happening. And we also looked at the financial practices of the Manion family and of the subversion of the nonprofit status of the NPC.
So how did you become the guy and the investigator to uncover all of this?
Well, Mark, as I think I've got a bit of a background in the sport. My father was George Butler, who made the Pumping Iron movies. So it was a big part of my childhood. And then I didn't think about it much for a long time. But, I love the sport and I admire what goes into bodybuilding. So my father died about 18 months ago.
Right.
And this was kind of an opportunity to go back into his world. And because of him, I had a lot of contacts in the sport. I started hearing some stories. And, I'm not a filmmaker like my father. I'm an investigative reporter, and it seemed like a really important vein of reporting.
I totally appreciate, that honor that you've paid to your father through this, right? It's often said that your father, George Butler, really put bodybuilding on the map and especially modern bodybuilding and, really helped make some big names very famous. Arnold Schwarzenegger was, a bodybuilder from Austria. And then all of a sudden he became this, household name, through Pumping Iron. And, other people have said that Pumping Iron was probably the most important documentary to have ever been done, not just with bodybuilding, but to have ever been done because of the things he was able to capture and show on screen. So, your dad's responsible for so much more than just putting out a movie. We look at bodybuilding today and the great success that so many people have had, whether it was through TV or, they own gyms and they're doing, financially wonderful for themselves because of all of those opportunities that came to be. So now here we are, and, we're looking at, the NPC, the amateur portion of the pro league. And, we're looking at the pro league, and, so many people are chasing that fame and that fortune. And I think what a lot of the story uncovered was some people felt so compelled to do things that they normally wouldn't do in hopes of, becoming famous, right? And kind of being forced into do that with the hopes of becoming famous and successful. And, I just saw this morning, matter of fact, it looked like Inside Edition, they just picked up on your story, and they did, some interviews that were put out. What were some of the things that, that like really shocked you with all of this?
Well, I think the reporting really went into the integrity of the sport, right? You have people that devote their lives to this. What goes into becoming a top bodybuilder. It's enormous amount of work, enormous amount of dedication. Some people might even say pain. And if the integrity of the end result is in question, that's a big problem. And so, I talked to, as you mentioned, women who described how they were exploited into, softcore pornography and felt pressured to have sex to get ahead in the sport. And, also people who, really felt like they had to play the politics, right? If the integrity of bodybuilding obviously is the judging, right? And people think that that's more than subjective, that it's got to do with politics and sex and money. That raises pretty serious questions.
Yeah, there's a lot of red flags that come up, and even on my side of the sport, I'm into natural bodybuilding, right? So we're 100% tested, WADA standards, and it's always questionable, like and especially the people that get second place or third place, right? They're always thinking that they should have won. But some of the things that you found out, people that did win, not only was there thoughts of maybe some improprieties on the judge's part, there was actually things going on.
Yeah, to kind of drill into it a little bit, we found that J.M. Manion, who is, as most people know, the son of Jim Manion, the head of the NPC and IFBB Pro, was openly managing the careers of a lot of female athletes, particularly in the bikini division. And the assumption there was that if you got on his team, you were going to do better. So already, the working assumption was that politics was going to get you better placing. And then we found that he was responsible for setting up a number of softcore porn sites, and a number of women told us that they were pressured into doing nude shoots for those sites, on the belief that if they didn't do that, their career was effectively over in the sport.
And there were some people that just gave up everything that they were working so hard for many years, right? Because they wanted to get away from that. These were big names in the sport that this affected.
Yeah.
So, it's my understanding that, JM had women on contract, right? And there were supposed to be, some profit sharing, based off of the pictures that were put out. And, many of the women, they weren't paid. And many of the women seemed to not even know that their pictures ended up on websites like this.
Well, in some cases, they found out because I asked them about it. And wow. For instance, I sat with Jennifer Gates, who, was an Olympia winner.
Right.
And that was the first time that that she really realized that she was on there. Now, they were not nude photos, but nonetheless, I don't think she wanted her images up on those sites.
You know, bodybuilding is, you know, as your dad put it, it is a sport and it is an art form, right? Where you're displaying your physique in front of, you know, thousands or millions of people. And, you know, there's going to be people taking pictures of you when you're on stage. But when those pictures of you in a different environment become public without your consent, you know, I mean, there's got to be some sort of, you know, repercussions here. You know, how do these women even, how do you even recover from something like this once you find this out?
Well, I mean, there's a difference between the sport and the NPC and the IFBB Pro, right? As you well know.
Right.
But yeah, I think a lot of, you know, people, not just women, have left the sport because they think it's unhealthy and it's not what they signed up for. I mean, you know, I think everybody knows how many bodybuilders are dying.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a whole nother sad story.
Yeah. And so as you bring that up, one of my platforms this year with the Mr. America is I'm preaching athlete safety. And when I talk about athlete safety, I mean everything from, you know, hey, wear your seatbelt when you go to the gym. Make sure your meat is cooked to the proper temperature. And, you know, also be very cautious about the things that you're doing, you know, around the show with, you know, photographers especially, right? You always hear stories about creepy photographers. Look, you have creepy photographers and then you have photographers that are literally exploiting you, right? So I want athletes, men and women, to both be safe. And now that, you know, you bring up the point of, you know, all of these athletes dying, they're pushing their bodies and their morals beyond belief to achieve some type of stardom, right? So I know, was it over 20 or in the 20s, just in the most recent years, people that have died, and all linked back to the drug use. So we have athletes really, you know, really pushing the envelope for this fame and perceived fortune. And unfortunately, when we look back, there hasn't been too many great success stories coming out of bodybuilding, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger or a Lou Ferrigno. So are people chasing something that may not actually be there at this point?
It depends what you're trying to get, right? I mean, you know, there's a lot of benefits from bodybuilding. You know, it's about self-transformation. It's about making your body healthier, right? At its best. And it spawned the fitness revolution in America. It brought a lot of really great things to American and, you know, international culture. So if your goal is to be the biggest, gnarliest bodybuilder out there and use every chemical you can find, you know, then it's a different thing.
This is the place for you then. You know, it's funny, you know, from 2010 to 2019, there was like a 58% increase of gym goers in the United States. They're saying it's a $73.5 billion industry just in the United States. That's not even worldwide. So, you know, worldwide, you know, we're talking, or in the United States, we're talking, you know, 210,000 gyms worldwide, 45,000 gyms just in the United States. And now pre-pumping iron, the number wasn't even close to that, you know? So everything your dad did, I don't know if he realized the effect that it would have down the line, you know, and how this would really change, you know, physical culture for one, and the American culture. You know, everybody, you know, we see it on Instagram and you know, Facebook, everybody's in the gym. Seems like you can't come across somebody who's not working out, who's not in the gym, and people who don't know who Arnold Schwarzenegger is, right? So I think a lot of that is pressuring people to try to put themselves out there in front of the right audiences, to get themselves the most exposure possible, to become one of those success stories. And that's probably the reason, in my opinion, why they push themselves to do the things that they do with the drugs.
Yeah, and I think it's probably even magnified now because we live in a social media world, right? And that amplifies it. It's not you can get your own stage in a sense.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, and your platform could be bigger than any bodybuilding show you go to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But to me, one of the most fascinating things about the sport is the cultural influence, because I don't know what percentage of Americans really know what bodybuilding is. Probably pretty small.
Yeah,
But
they say that about less than 1% of the population is into bodybuilding, right? So
yeah,
I know some numbers that you guys found out through investigations, that there was 50,000 members or 50,000 athletes registered to the NPC and the Pro League.
yeah.
So if we just use that number, right, because the NPC and the Pro League is one of, or it is the biggest organization in the United States, that's less than 1% of our population.
And yet the bodybuilders are kind of setting the standards for muscular development that has, profound influence on other sports, right?
Right.
It's not, you don't see so much pro football players promoting protein powders, right?
No, never.
And yet they use them.
Yeah, everybody's using it, right? Everybody's using protein powders and amino acids.
And they're following the diets, they're eating clean, they're, doing the same kind of sets. And, that's a big influence.
And, that's very surprising to me that bodybuilding isn't more mainstream, right? When you mention bodybuilding, everybody knows what it is, but it's not more mainstream. So, one of the projects that I worked on with my producer, who you spoke with briefly earlier, we did a 4-part reality show highlighting 6 pro natural bodybuilders, right? And that was televised on CBS Sports Network. So we're pushing for that mainstream feel, right? With more obtainable looking physiques, a healthier lifestyle. I don't know if it'll ever get there. And when people read about the stories like you've come up with and the things that are happening inside bodybuilding, it's hard for people not to lump it all together as, bodybuilding itself being bad. So, was your fear at any point like, hey, wow, this could give the whole sport a black eye?
Well, I mean, the sense that I got when I really kind of immersed myself in it again, is that it needed that. There's so much that's become unhealthy that people have to be a little bit more self-critical, and there needs to be reforms.
So, I'm hoping to see reform, in bodybuilding. Some people are aware, some people aren't aware that there is a natural side of this, right? So there's multiple natural organizations, and, they're obviously much smaller. If all of those organizations got together and put all of their members or athletes in a pool, there's less than 10,000. So are the steroids that prevalent on the other side of things, where out of those 50,000 people, do you think 50,000 people are all using steroids over there, in hopes to chase that prize at the end of the rainbow?
I mean, I wouldn't want to pick a number out of the air. I mean, I got the sense that there's a lot of pressure in the NPC to go in that direction, whichever category you're in. Mm-hmm. But look, it's not just the bodybuilding world, and it's not just the members of the NPC, right? There are teenagers out there taking steroids because they can't think past 25 years old, and they want to get places quickly. So again, that's the dark side of the influence.
Yeah. And they're looking up to social media influencers and other bodybuilders with the hopes of achieving that, right? So they look at that and they see themselves in that person. Wow, if I do what this person did, I could become that. And how does this get reformed? How do we take this back and clean up the entire sport to where there are morals again, and there are ethics, and we are truly celebrating the human body and the physiques that are built and born from this lifestyle. Can we get back to that? I feel it's so far gone. Like, it's almost an impossibility at this point between, drugs and social media and everything else that's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the answer to that. I'm not in the business of policy. I'm in the business of trying to reflect what the reality is out there. But the upshot of that should be some kind of accountability and self-reflection but I don't get the sense that there's a ton of that happening in the part of the sport I'm writing about.
How many hours of interviews and research went into putting these together? I mean, these weren't 1 and 2 paragraph articles. I mean, every single article was so in depth and so clear. Like, I know you had a team of people working on this. What went into all of this?
I couldn't even estimate. It was a lot of work. I mean, we it was really my focus for a year. And I interviewed well over 100 people. I had colleagues who interviewed maybe as many or at least dozens. And we had a huge team. If you look at those stories, it's multimedia. It's a big production. So we really invested a lot in it.
We always talk about it being such a subjective sport, and you already have that problem. And, one of the things that we're finding out is based on the judge's body type, right? They're judging based on what they look like, right? So it's very hard to make sure that judging panel is 100% on the up and up, which is why we have so many judges. We use, I'll put 9 judges on a panel. We're only using 7 of them. The high score and the low score gets factored out of that. But come to find out in one of the articles, we hear that Jim Manion is, pointing to people on stage on who should be getting the win, and then scores actually being changed to accommodate that.
That's what other judges have said, and I think I also wrote about how J.M. Manion was influencing the judging through other judges, potentially. And, so that would bother me a lot if I'd put my heart and soul to getting up on those stages.
But it seems like it is much bigger than just JM or just Jim Manion. It almost feels like, the coaches have some responsibility in this also.
I mean, coaches have a huge influence in the sport. There's no doubt. I mean, people talk about coaches like they're religious figures or gurus, right? And they trust them. You have a lot of people who are coming into this sport as, teenagers or in their early 20s, and somebody's giving them a roadmap. Who are they to say, right?
Right.
And so the responsibility of being a coach and guiding people on their health and their well-being is enormous.
So we have sex, we have drugs. What else comes with that? Money, right? So in bodybuilding, we know, and athletes always talk about all the money that the promoters are making, and they're making all this money, not giving any of the money back. As a businessman, I understand the business side of this, right? Nobody wants to go into this to lose money. We're trying to make a living off of something that we love to do. And, there's some people that do things differently than others, as we see with, some political figures and their taxes, right? And then, you have nonprofits that we've been made aware of through history that, they're only, donating, 10 cents on every $100,000 or whatever it is. So now you have the NPC years ago was structured as a nonprofit. What was the goal of the nonprofit part of that? Was that something that you were ever able to get to the bottom of?
No, I mean, look, a number of the power brokers in the sport in the late 70s got together And as you may know, the amateur part of the sport was run by the AAU at that point. And they created a new committee that became a new organization that was eventually the NPC. And it was set up as a nonprofit, a charitable organization. And that was the organization that ran the sport until recently. And, as a nonprofit organization, it was meant to be a nonprofit to benefit the athletes, to benefit the sport. And at a certain point that got subverted.
So were these intentional acts? Were they intentionally trying to skirt the system here and game it for profit?
Well, I mean, here's just a basic fact, right? Like I said, the NPC was a 501c3 charitable organization. It's not now. It's run as a for-profit now. And it was registered in Ohio. Under Ohio law, a nonprofit can't become a for-profit. So something happened there.
Desmond, with all of the information that came to light, did you have a chance to interview Jim Manion? Did Jim Manion himself, give you a statement in regards to any of this? Where does that stand?
Well, I met Jim Manion very briefly at the Arnold Classic this time last year. That was really before we'd done most of the reporting, so we didn't talk about it too much. I also met J.M. Manion.
Right.
When we were closer to publication and asked them, the organizations and Jim Manion, about some of the allegations, we got various statements that generally, I think at one point they called the allegations unsubstantiated tales from unreliable sources. Wow. And, when we were investigating the practices at the NPC, a spokesman for the organization said that they had followed all state and federal laws.
So you're doing all these investigations, you're coming up with all of this information. Like you must be mind blown at some of the things you're hearing. Were you ever expecting from the start of this that you would come across so many things, or did this turn into a rabbit hole that just kept going?
Well, I mean, I think as I wrote a kind of personal story in the first person on how this all came to be. And one of the key moments was that I ran into Wayne D'Amelia at my father's memorial. And sometime after that, I sat down with Wayne and he started telling me what he was hearing was happening in the sport. Mm-hmm. And my editor was there, and I turned to her afterwards and I said, if 25% of what we just heard is true, it's going to be a hell of a ride. And, there's a lot there. I mean, there's a lot more I could do in terms of reporting on the sport, and maybe we will.
What is your relationship with Wayne or to Wayne? How long have you known him? What's that like?
I've known Wayne since I was a kid. He was a close friend of my father's. I hadn't talked to him in a long time until my father passed away. But he's someone that is has a lot of stories, and I listened to what he had to say, and I went out and reported it.
What made you think, hey, I should really look into this, instead of, like you obviously believed what Wayne was saying for you to do this.
Yeah, well, look, we never take a source and just take whatever they say verbatim. And first of all, the stories that Wayne told me were pretty incredible, and it seemed worth doing the reporting. But ultimately, Wayne D'Amelia wasn't a major source for the factual information in the stories. We took them as tips. We went off. We talked to hundreds of people, I think, at least many, many dozens. And that really is the basis for the reporting in the story. So We might believe somebody, but we always verify it. As investigative reporters, we have people coming to us with agendas all the time. And there's no question that Wayne DeMillia has an agenda. But then we go out and report that. I thought what Wayne told me was a good start. I then spent hundreds of hours researching this through public documents, through many dozens at least of interviews. And so we did our homework.
Hopefully some good does come of this, and there is some reform and protections put in place for the athletes. And, I'm hoping to see it return to, the integrity that it once had. In the 70s and early 80s, things were much, much different than they are today. And, society as a whole has changed. And, I don't blame one thing or another specifically, but it's morphed out of control at this point. And it does need to be reeled in, as many other things in life now need to be reeled in.
I agree with all of that. I don't think we should idealize what the sport was in the 70s too much either. I heard a lot of stories from my father and from other people. There's always been there have always been problems, but I think it's certainly got worse.
How big and how many people do you think this affects that we don't know about?
Well, that goes back to the influence. I mean, I know anecdotally there are really young people getting kidney transplants.
Yeah.
Right? That may be trying to compete in bodybuilding, or might be trying to make the varsity football team.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of reasons that the steroids have gotten out of control. One of them is that it's as you know, not very well enforced. I think the FBI and police and all sorts of authorities are so overwhelmed by the opioid crisis that they can't invest a lot in policing steroids.
Yeah, so I come from a law enforcement background, and I've been sitting in a class for the past week or so, and I was talking with some people that are, like with the prosecutor's office locally, and the topic of steroids came up, and we were talking about why aren't steroids, why isn't anyone cracking down on that? We have a lot of top bodybuilders publicly talking about the cycles that they use and the types of drugs that they use, almost as if it's a roadmap to get to where they've been. And what they told me was nobody's really looking at it for personal use. If you have all the drugs that you're using for yourself, nobody really cares. And it's like a lot of the other things going on right now. Some people even say, we have immigration laws, they're just not being enforced. And there are a lot of laws on the books that could essentially stop some of this if they were only enforced. So did you talk with anybody in law enforcement regarding, the drug use and the tax evasion allegations? And is bodybuilding on anyone's radar at this point?
I think it must be. And as you know, like occasionally there are big busts. And, it seems to happen periodically, maybe when it gets even more out of hand. But it's a big market. You say it's, when nobody's enforcing personal use, but the people are getting it from somewhere, and somebody's making lots of money. And I'm not seeing a ton of big steroid stings.
No, not in a long time. Obviously you're familiar with the article with the female athlete who, they found non-responsive, who was in the hospital, and come to find out the amount of drugs her coach was essentially having her use. I mean, damn, could have killed her. Our coaches aren't being held liable for this either at this point.
Well, I mean, one exercise would be to see, of the really prominent athletes even who have died in recent years, who was coaching them, and what responsibility have the coaches taken? I mean,
yeah, this is so big. It's so hard to even scratch just the surface to get this message out to people. So again, I'm going to ask it again. Was there something so overwhelming that you found where you're like, hey, this is the message that we need to be letting people know?
Well, we exposed quite a lot of problems, as you said. I haven't seen the accountability, right? That, to me, that's what hits me the hardest.
We're doing something that is supposed to be good for you, right? Going to the gym and eating a clean diet, all this is supposed to be good for you until you take it to a point where, you're compromising your morals, your ethics, and your health in the chase of something that may not be fair. So I think my takeaway, again, for this is, hey, you got to keep your eyes open, and your safety on every level is paramount to everything else. So I'm hoping people, they also get that part of it.
And I think, the elders in the sport need to take care of the young people too, right? I mean,
yeah, there are good people in the sport. There are people that want to see the right things being done. There were people that were shocked to even find out about this, that claimed they had no clue what was going on. And it's just, is this worldwide? Is this just in the United States? I know the NPC has a worldwide presence right now. So did anything bring you overseas? Was there, allegations like this coming out of other countries within the same organization? Or was this limited to the United States group?
I don't think the problems in the sport are limited to the United States or to the NPC and the IFBB Pro. I think it's definitely broader than that. We had a scope of our investigation. We might widen that scope at some point, but I think it's bigger than what we looked at.
Okay, Desmond. So, what would your father make of all of this? To know that his son is the one uncovering all of these improprieties in the sport that he made famous. What would he say about what's going on today?
I mean, I think he would have, watched on with both amusement and pride, I hope. What he did and what I do is a very different thing. He was really focused on the beauty of the sport, the art of the sport, and of introducing it to America. And Pumping Iron is whatever it is not really investigative journalism. And by the nature of that, I'm kind of looking at the underbelly.
Yeah, internet psychics are talking about there's more coming from the Washington Post, that this isn't over yet. So I'm personally looking forward to see what you're doing, because I just, the whole investigative part of it, you ask one question and it goes on to something else, and you've uncovered so many things that you probably weren't even imagining could be so deep. So it's going to be interesting to see what else you guys, put out. And I hope everybody that's listening today does follow this story and could take something positive out of this. And again, athlete safety, I want everyone out there to be safe and remain as healthy as possible. And, don't ever compromise, your morals for a trophy. There's other things you could be doing that, you could probably be much more successful at, other than, compromising yourself. So with that being said, Desmond, this has been great. I'm going to follow along. I hope all of our listeners follow along. And as this progresses, I'd love to have you back and learn more about, what you've been doing.
Happy to.
Is this going to be another year-long investigation, or who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. I got a lot of other things on my radar, but I do have this connection and care for the sport.
Well, thank you for everything that you've done for the sport, and from your father too. This has got to be something that has him rolling in his grave to see, how bad things have actually turned out.
Well, thank you for having me, Mark.
No problem. Thank you, Desmond. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. Definitely keep an eye out for possible more articles to come. If you haven't read the articles that Desmond and the Washington Post have put out, I highly suggest you go do that and keep aware of everything that's going on in the sport that we love so much. And as a reminder, the Mr. America will be coming up October 6th through 8th this year at Atlantic City, New Jersey.
One time, go get it, it's yours, let's shine.